Hello and welcome to Lessons from the Sidelines. I'm Tom Crean, and I'm a brother-in-law of the Harbaugh brothers that have put the Harbaugh Coaching Academy together. John and Jim made this possible. It's been a phenomenal venture to be involved in and to get a chance to not only talk to them, but to other outstanding leaders and coaches and innovators inside of sports. And eventually we'll get into business and politics and those types of things as well. But right now, we're going to stay in basketball. We're going to stay with an outstanding coach, Chris Caputo, who is just finishing his fourth season at George Washington University. He had an outstanding career as an assistant coach, built up a name, built up a resume, built up really an edge as not only as a recruiter, but as a pure, full coach, a guy that could teach, a guy that could game plan, a guy that could scout, a guy that could recruit, a guy that could administer, a guy that could put out fires, you name it. And that is exactly some of the stuff we're going to get into today inside of this session with Chris. But first of all, welcome, Chris, to Lessons from the Sidelines.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate you having me. Honored to be on here. Great to be with you. You've been so great to me throughout the years. And then obviously the Harbaugh Academy and obviously have really respected both Harbaugh brothers and your father-in-law from afar for many, many years. So great to be on here. Anytime you can be associated with you guys, you want to do it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because that's exactly what we want these podcasts to be about. This is not a fluff show. This is not a soundbite show. This is really like what's real life and what really goes on. And you're right in the middle of it. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But I want to hit this. I want to do a little revisionist here. 4 years in as a head coach, what would be 2 or 3 things that you absolutely wish you would have known when you started out? Obviously, it's impossible to know, but what do you wish you would have known 4 years ago when you took over?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this. I've been asked this question a little bit like a lot of young head coaches or newer head coaches have been asked, and I probably will give an answer that doesn't answer it the way you asked it, but I think is my best way of describing, like, as a 20-year assistant coach, with the same person. So obviously there's a way of doing things that I became accustomed to, and I tried to learn as much as I could about the way other people did things because I kind of knew, hey, I'm only going to have one perspective here. I felt like I was very prepared, having been in a lot of different jobs within our program, from a volunteer to an associate head coach, and having gone to Final Four, Elite Eight, 2 Sweet 16s, a lot of different experiences. What I didn't really know was that the job, literally the April 2022, when I came to George Washington University, that the job itself was going to completely change in many ways. Not in totality, right? You still have to get players better. You still have to build relationships. You have to lead. But the way in which you do all those things in the environment that we are in now, there are many things that, you felt like, oh, well, I would implement this or I would think about it this way. And the profession and the business of doing this job has just changed completely. And so I would say, in a way, even veteran head coaches there was new territory. We were all in new territory. So in some ways, it was a blessing in the sense that, like, some guys who had been probably in a pretty good groove because of the way things were being done in our business for many, many years, they were kind of taken off kilter a little bit and out of their comfort zone, much like an assistant coach who would get a new head coaching job. It's just a lot of the things that you would apply were not going to be relevant in the new world. And so, I didn't know that, right? I think, and it happened so fast, like it's like weeks, right? Like that was that first year of coming off COVID, really the first year of NIL, really the first year of visits with NIL and immediate eligibility as it relates to recruiting. And so some of the roster building, some of the philosophies of how things had been done, I mean, literally, like, you're talking about the job in March and like, let's say by the time you got to May 1st, you're like, oh, all those things are out the window. It's completely different. And I don't know that maybe it's just my own bias of my situation, but I would say there's a lot of guys in that getting a job in 21, 22, 23 for the first time, that would probably say, hey, this is about the strangest time to ever get a job.
Sure.
So I don't know if that
No,
answers
it
it. Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. No, and I want to skip to this question because obviously there was so much change, and you were still an assistant when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then everything changed within that year period of time where COVID came. So everything was off Zoom, everything was off video. Well, then the NIL went totally in.
Yeah.
And in its infant stages, and we'll put that in perspective here in a second. And the portal went in. So all of a sudden, we always dealt against cheaters, as did you did, I did, all those types of things. But then all of a sudden, people had money, different levels of money. There were fifth-year transfers. There were people that could transfer, sit out. All of a sudden, you could leave at any point in time. That was my last year at Georgia. We had 9 different guys leave. We signed a full new team. I only knew 2 people that I'd ever recruited in person my last year at Georgia. And we had a grand total of $6,200 in the NIL that first year. Okay. Now we're probably, correct me if I'm wrong, we're probably looking at an easy 20 to 25 teams in Division I that'll be $18 million plus this season and their roster building. So I got a 2-part question for you. Okay. As all this has changed and you've been smack dab in the middle of the change, I can always go back and look at experiences that I had that helped me in coaching. Like when I took over at Indiana, and when you go through these things, maybe a coaching thing didn't help you make this change. Maybe it was something from somebody in business or somebody in a different part of the sports world or somebody in a different part of the world that helped you, where you look back and say, you know what? I can handle this because I've dealt with this and this, and I know this and this. What were those situations that helped prepare for that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think one of the benefits of I was at George Mason for 9 years with Coach Larinaga, and then 11 years at Miami. When I got to George Mason, they had turned around a program that had 7 straight losing seasons, 4 straight last place seasons, and they had gone to the NCAA tournament twice in 4 years when I got there. So the program was on the uptick, but it was post 9/11. There were a lot of budgetary issues at places across the country at that time, and it was still a commuter school that was trying to build a fan base and build interest. And we very much, and I was maybe a little bit of my skill set, but also like kind of the way Coach Larinaga thought, because he had been at Bowling Green, where it was probably some of the same stuff. You had to drum up interest in your program. You had to drum up interest in why it was important to support the program financially. And so, and I think we started to do that in fall of 2002, 2003, and started to really raise money for the program in a way that they hadn't done before. And we always kind of said there was a couple of different groups of people that we cultivated, and I think using the word cultivate was really important. You're cultivating those friendships, you're cultivating their dollars. But we make the Final Four in 2006, and I don't think it's a coincidence that 4 years prior to that was really when the cultivating of people in our community, stakeholders, the financial commitment that people were making. And again, back then it wasn't huge numbers, but it was significant at the time. And that really taught me that the jobs that we were in, go to Miami, I think Miami's reputation at that time was nobody went to the games. They were operating at a very low level in terms of financially. And we had to basically do the same thing. And so I was very comfortable in that environment. I would say first, like selling, not the program, like, oh, this is why you should help us because we'll be good. I'm even going as far as saying why basketball is important, why athletics is important on campus or in the community or what have you. And when I got to GW, it was very similar, and I was very comfortable in that environment because I said, hey, I know how to articulate to donors, administrators, actually people who maybe have the capacity but have never given before, or maybe people that don't necessarily live and die by whether we, win 20 games or 18 games or whatever, but but that the role of athletics and our basketball program would be important for their investment and their support. So having been at places like that, whereas I know maybe for you when you were at Marquette, I think you had to do a lot of that. Whereas
Sure.
maybe you're at Indiana, it's like, hey, listen, it's Indiana, like people, it's ingrained there.
We had to do it. Yeah, we lost a lot. I've never been in one situation, and I think that I was going to hit this later, but I think that's one of the places that you and I have connected so much as friends over the years, because when I use the term friend raiser, like
Right.
not everyone has to be a fundraiser, but everyone has to be a friend
Right.
raiser in a program, and I think you epitomize that. Now, obviously, you also raise funds, but not everybody has to make the ask, but everybody else has to live the reason why.
Right.
Why are we giving, right?
Yeah.
And I think you have done. I've always thought of you inside of that term, because as an assistant coach, you were as good as anybody that I've ever seen in that.
Yeah.
And it's an unbelievable skill that most people don't see as required. But if you're going to be successful in coaching and in this business world of coaching, it is absolutely required. What do you think, when I use that term friend raise, how do you get that across to people, how important that is on your staff?
I think two of the things that, and I may have heard, like either Josh Harris or somebody in NBA ownership, might have been Josh Harris, I'm just thinking going back, but I think it was like, they think they're running a basketball team, but they're actually running a community asset, right? I think that's one thing, you think you're running a basketball program, like, well, yeah, there's only certain places in the country or even in the world where, like, it's really, really important to run a basketball program. But there's a lot of places where it's really important to run a community asset, right? And the thing that I've used here is, our job is to unite and inspire our community through the power of teamwork, right? And so what's the job? Well, the job's to win the basketball games, yes. But really more than that, it's the ability to unite and inspire this community. This is at these places where school is costing $100,000 a year, like at a private school like ours. They've got to have a reason to go to school here outside of going to class. They've got to have a reason to build that community and feel a part of something, to gather all the different constituencies on a campus. And, like football has obviously been a big way to do that in a lot of places. But at the schools like Marquette or at GW or at George Mason, basketball is probably the one way. I mean, really the one way. There's they're not getting together a science project, respectful of science. They're not getting together, at some sort of academic thing most of the time. And so that's where the sports, I think, has such a powerful draw. And then you ask those people, okay, is this important? Yes. Okay, what is it worth to you? And then when you start thinking about the numbers, it's actually, these are not big asks at most places relative to the total operating budget of a university or the total sort of capacity of the donor base. Basketball in particular, I think football is probably more challenging, but basketball at a place that maybe has, a multi-billion-dollar operating budget, and you're saying, hey, listen, for, not tens of millions, but millions, we can build community. We can inspire our community. We can build pride. We can build connections. Our deans can bring their donors in and entertain them and do that. How much is that worth? It's pretty valuable at these places. And so I think telling the staff, to your point, I think the staff understanding that is really, because I think as we've all been assistant coaches, I was for a long time, you kind of get your head in this scouting, recruiting, certainly developing a player, and you have to keep your staff understanding that there's a larger mission here. We're not private equity here. We're not running bottom lines that make much sense, to be honest. But we are building something that universities can't really do any other way.
So how do you get that? How do you get that across? Because assistant coaches, you got to wear a lot of hats, right? The difference a lot of times between an assistant coach and the head coach, and this is where assistant coaches get ready to be head coaches, and it's exactly what you did. The head coach can't ever put the hats under the desk. He can juggle the hats and move the hats, but they stay on the desk. The assistant coach a lot of times think they're going to get rid of some of those hats when they don't feel like it. And so everybody likes the fun stuff. But the friend raising, the getting it across, like when you get that quiet, you're a personality person by nature, but there's a realness obviously to you. It's not you can deal with the media in any situation. You can walk into any room in the world and be successful because it's real. But a lot of people have trouble pulling themselves out of that and becoming somebody that can be counted on and be that friend raiser. How do you get people, especially the younger coaches today, that are far too quiet, have far too many opinions on things, want to be heard, but at the same time don't exactly know how to say it, how to get there? How do you get that out of people?
Yeah, I think the two things. One, and I think Coach Larinaga did a great job of this for us, is he always provided a lot of context into the inner workings of whether it be your institution's politics or what was actually going on, what people's motivations were, what their objectives might be, so that you kind of understood the more global challenges that might exist. I think, again, it's all of us have always been like, oh, wait, we can't do this. Why can't we do this? That's BS. Hey, so-and-so can do this. Why can't we do this? And I think he did a really good job of sort of giving us the perspective of understanding, okay, here's why we're here. Here's what we might be willing to do or can do. Here's why it probably won't change. This is what we're going to have to do to change it. So I think that the assistant coaches would understand that there's a broader thing going on here that we have to manage. And then I also think, like, for me, I would remind those guys all the time that we want to expose them and our players to people who are more successful than us and ask those people a lot of questions rather than provide commentary. Like you said, they want to be heard, but I think the more questions you ask of people that are successful, the more you learn. And a lot of times, sometimes it can be unnerving to you because you're like, gosh, that's well beyond what I could have even thought of or imagined, or I feel like I'm so far off from that. Sure. But I think you learn.
I think people respect that, though. Yeah. I think when you deal, and you've done a phenomenal job of this. I mean, you're comfortable walking down the street and talking to somebody that doesn't know where they're going to sleep tonight, but you're also comfortable walking into a room full of billionaires. And the bottom line is this: when you're curious and when you're inquisitive and you have real intentions, right? Like there's no agenda.
Yeah.
And that's what part of friend raising is.
Yes.
You're not just walking in with, how do I get this money?
Right.
You're walking in with, how do I get this person to believe in what I'm doing, believe in what we're doing, and how do I mean it, right? And I think that's an area that you're so strong in that I think people struggle in is the way of like, okay, I want to keep diving in, and I'm not learning all these things from these people so I can go put them on the internet. I'm learning these people because I want to apply it. And I think the rich, the wealthy, the great coaches, the great leaders, when they find somebody that's truly interested, not every case, there's going to be arrogance places, but I mean, more often than not, those people want to help you.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah, I would say unquestionably. I think, I think it's the old, like, if you ask for help, you may or may not get it. But if you ask for advice, I think people become very connected to the advice that they're giving you to see if it works. They become, so they become a part of that. And I heard you say this a long time ago. I don't know if you remember, you used to talk a little bit, maybe you still do, about, aspiring versus ambition. I thought those are great things that you hit on, where I don't find myself to be overly ambitious in some ways, but I do aspire to things, and
Exactly.
and I think that's what you're looking for.
Difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and ambition so many times, they're going to get where they want, whether you get there or not. And even if they have to step on you to get there, aspiring to get something means, yeah, I want the same thing, but I also know that you want it as well, or you want to get this, and we got to figure out a way that we can both get it. And I think in this world, ambition so many times is glamorized as being something that's good, where when you have the wrong intentions, that's where it happens. And I think that's the same thing when you're building a program, because in this day and age, to me, and I want to transition into basketball on this, is that when you have so many people, let's start with, let's not talk yet about how different your team is every year based on how you bring them in. And you've done a very good job with retention. Let's talk about the fact that there's so many people that want to get to the same place at the same time. And in the world of basketball, it's the NBA, right? They want to get to the NBA. How do you navigate having a team that you want to be like-minded, but at the same time, they want to get to the same place? And how do you navigate that when it becomes territorial, when it becomes jealousy kicks in? Because the people, and that's what I want this podcast to be. This is not some fluffy, oh, the world is great. No, the world is hard. And coaching basketball is hard, because getting to winning is really, really difficult. But those are all things that can get in the way of winning. How do you navigate that?
I think it's really challenging. First of all, I don't necessarily think that this is new. First of all, newer, and I'm not so sure that I would really like young people right now with the money that's out there. I don't know that I blame them for maybe not totally understanding how to deal with all that comes. You know what I mean? It's not them. It's
They're still 18,
yeah,
19,
they're 18,
20.
19 years old. We're all used.
Everybody forgets.
Yeah, I mean, we're all used to, like, hey, we've all coached in a league where, hey, we made this money and the next guy makes this money, and you know, at some point as a grown up, you kind of go, hey, but this really has nothing to do with me, right? What someone else makes or whatever. I you know, my situation is my own. I'm not sure how easy it is for 18, 19-year-old, 20, 21-year-old guys to be sitting in the same locker room and looking around, and how should they feel about those things. Like, I think we've got to help them with it, and I'm not sure that, like, I have a great answer to that, other than I know, look, it has to be win-win. I think if we only win basketball games, but you don't get out of this what you want, in terms of your improvement and some of the things you aspire to do, I don't think that that's win-win, and I think it's short-lived, either between you and I, or basically what our program could be, you know. And then on the other hand, if it's just you get what you want, but we don't win, but we won't exist very long. So how do you get to that? I'm sure you know Brian Kite, you know, who who's become a good friend, and we talked a lot about, people talk about sacrifice, and you know, you wonder if sacrifice is the word versus exchange.
Sacrifice is a 4-letter word in most people's minds.
Correct, and I think that's what
it really is. I believe that for 20 years.
Yeah, the minute you say sacrifice, whoa, hold on, what am I sacrificing?
Yeah.
You know what?
Exactly what you just did.
Yeah.
You become defensive.
What am I sacrificing?
When you hear the word
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas, you know, so Brian had talked to us a little bit about exchange. Like, what if I said to you, hey, look, we're going to need you to exchange some of this to get more of this.
Sure.
You know, and I think that's where, like, you know, we've tried to go a little bit, but I think that's challenging. And, you know, it's the old thing. You give people money, you find out a lot more about them, you know, than before they've had it. Yeah. So but
let me ask you this question. I think this is be very interesting, and I know you deal with this. And this is the part that I didn't get. Like, I've dealt with everything but in coaching, but this scenario, okay? So let's say we're sitting in the locker room, okay, and you are averaging 15, 16 points in your last 5 games. You are averaging 10, okay? But you're making $250,000 less than I am, all right? And I'm in a slump right now. I'm shooting 27% from 3. I'm still getting minutes, but my attitude's a little shaky. I'm not playing as well. All right. How do you navigate with you as a coach? Because you're putting these numbers up and your family and your coaches, and they're saying, man, so-and-so's making this, so-and-so's making that. You're not getting enough. But wait a minute. We're still in January, right? And we got 18, 17 games left. How do you navigate that? Because I think that is a real issue that people are fighting constantly throughout the country and any sport right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a great answer for it, but I think we're still trying to learn. And you know, the only thing I could tell you is, like, I've heard about coaches who have sat the whole team down prior to the season and say, hey, this is what Tom makes, this is what Chris makes, this is why we did that. And then that's that. I don't know if that's the right move or not.
But it's going to come up.
It's going to come
right?
up.
Like,
they all talk to each other. They all talk to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These are real bullets I'm talking about that I think this is where me being in the media world, you know what's going on. You can see it. You can hear it from other people. You can see, and nobody wants to touch that stuff, right? Like television don't want to touch that. Well, no, it's real.
It's real.
This has got so much to do with because there's so many people trying to pull teams apart, right? There's more people on the outside trying to pull a team apart than help you do your job for the better.
Yeah,
I think that's where I wanted to go with my next question.
And again, I'm not saying I did it right or not, because I don't know. The one thing I tried to tell guys when they came in is, like, look, two things are true, and we'll guarantee. One, I will guarantee you that you'll get every cent that we agree upon. Like, the university has committed to that. The other thing I will guarantee is that we're not going to play people based on how much we're paying them. And that's that. And like, you know, so it's real simple, you know. But again, it doesn't stop the guy who's making a little bit less money and playing better from saying, man, I wish I should have been making that. You know, how you help young people deal with that, it's a challenge. You know, other than, I think, if you go in promising.
That's what I was going to hit you on. What's the promise culture like now? Like, what would you say?
I think it's
that's like.
Yeah, I think it's tremendous. I think people are promising a lot, and I think we've really tried not to do that. And I had a high, probably the highest paid player last year. You know, full disclosure, like he came off the bench every game, and it was, you know, nothing personal. It was, he had some good games and everything. It just was based on performance. And so, you know, that I'm actually use that to tell, because I've had guys call and say, well, hey, we like it, but we know you got so-and-so, and our guess is in the market that guy was more expensive. So does that mean that my player's situation is not going to be as good? And we said, like, listen, we just sort of respond to the market as best we can to try to build the team we can. But once the team is built, then it's on performance.
Absolutely. Well, you've built it up there every year, and you go to the event in Vegas a year ago. The name escapes me.
Yeah, the Crown. Went to the Crown and then the NIT this year.
The NIT this year. Yeah. So, like, you're building it up, and you're doing you're on such a great trajectory. And when we start talking about the 18 million plus at 2025, which may be a low estimate at the end of the day, right. You're not there at George Washington. You're not anywhere near on the bottom. I'm not even sure if you're in the middle, but you have a good situation. You've built it up. How do you navigate in a recruiting battle with somebody that you know is offering more money, but your role for them, your opportunity for them, the what you know about what you have versus what that other program has? How do you handle that with the agents and the kids right now?
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit offline. I kind of think like, I kind of think like, what each program has to decide, what it is that they can differentiate themselves with, and you hope that you would have built up some things that you can point to, and everyone's are a little bit different. I know when we were at, you know, three different situations, and I'm sure you could speak to yours at the different places you've been, but like geography used to be the thing that allowed you to be targeted in recruiting. Like, there was a real belief that, like, no matter how hard you worked, 18% of the top 100 players went to school over 1,000 miles from home. That was the old world. And so when we were at Miami, we were so far away from people that we were like, gosh, we're not working off much of the list, because we're so far away. So we have to be very targeted about what it is that worked. And we kind of went down the transfer path. One of the reasons was that the great programs would not be willing to invest in a year off, like a guy sitting out. So we sat out Angel Rodriguez. We sat out Sheldon McClellan. They led us to a Sweet 16. Cam McGusty sat out. He led us to an Elite Eight. So we had this thing that we sold, and I thought it transcended maybe like prestige of the program or distance or whatever, because it was very clear. Here, to me, it's been the ability to take a rotational power 4 player, like a guy like Rafael Castro we just had, who averaged 2 points a game at Providence and might get drafted, and we'd say like we can do that. Here's how we've done it. Ricky Lindo was at University of Maryland, averaged 2 points a game. He just won the Euro Cup championship last night. Brendan Adams, again, was at UConn, didn't play much, was third team all league here. He's playing high, went NBA Summer League. So that's our pitch, but you have to have evidence behind it. I think you have, and just like you did. I mean, you had the evidence that you developed kind of under recruited guys into being, NBA All-Star Hall of Fame level players. Like, I don't think there's enough people in this process that have those distinct ways to share that about their program, and yet we're also not working in a rational market. Because I remember, there's many guys that I would say, man, I can't believe that guy didn't go to Indiana and play for Coach Crean. If he looked at Victor Oladipo or Dwayne Wade or whatever, like, hey, this would make sense if I were that guy, but there were other factors. Now the money is the factor, and you got to get close. I don't think you can be that far off, but if you're close, I do think there are agents now that are actually like thinking of things in those terms.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the separator of where this goes, because I think the agent that wants to keep the kid in college does not have an understanding of what it's going to take for that kid to be a pro. The agent that knows that if it doesn't go right for this player, he has no chance to be a pro. How do we get him there? There's two distinct kinds, and they're both making a lot of money. And the one that can keep the player in college longer is probably making significant money, but it's not developing the player. And I want to hit this because I think this is something that you were really good at with Coach Larinaga. And we could go back to George Mason. We could definitely look at it in Miami, and I think this has definitely been a part of your coaching. You, more often than not, are playing your best basketball at the end of the year. Now, you might have some hits during, right? And you might even have a hit late. But you're not having hits that knock you out. You come back from them. And at the end of the day, because we've had conversations where the sadness isn't that you got beat. The sadness is you were just getting really good, right? Like when you lose. What are some of the big keys? Because I think this is something that is very, very misunderstood about teams. And it's not just, you want to be playing your best basketball at the end of the year. To play your best basketball at the end of the year, a lot of things got to be going well. But there's still going to be problems inside of that. Yeah. But you got to be able to deal with those. What are some, when I say that, what stands out to you about why that is for you?
I think a maturity about your coaching staff, and probably I'll hearken to a little bit of stoicism that I try to study. Look, we're constantly trying to fix problems that exist, right? And that we are the chief problem solvers. You and I have spoken a lot about some of those things throughout the years, even within the season. You've given me some good things throughout the season, as have others. But I think not, again, it sounds very cliche, but trying to stay somewhat even keeled to me has always given teams the best chance to, hit that variance of really good play if we're problem solving, if we're working, and we're not like trying to burn the house down because something happens. And yet it's a fine line. Like, you got to address things head on. You can't let them linger. But I also think it's a fine line between them just burning the house down. And so how do you do that? How we do that? I try to do it the best I can. I know Coach Larnega did a good job of it. I thought guys were always playing for us, even, at the end of the season when things were maybe not as good or it had a snafu or what have you. But I think that people kind of get it, the hardness of some of the guys like a Tom Izzo or a Rick Pitino or those people. But you know what? I watch their teams play, and I think, like, I'm sure they went at those guys, but at some point they're lifting these guys up to be excited about competing.
Yeah, I think you're really good at that. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think the competing thing is a huge thing. Here's my last question, and we could go forever on this, but I started it with, okay, what do you wish you'd have known 4 years ago, right, when you took over? How has your view of what's most important in the game to win the game, how has that changed in 4 years as a head coach? So straight basketball.
Straight basketball.
Like, how has that changed?
Yeah.
Whether how you play, what you implement, how you view late games, anything that just hits you.
Yeah,
when I
I'll hit
question.
the trend that everyone's talking about. You think about the possession game, and I think that somewhere in my time, the possession game thing lost a little bit of its, like, people were more, getting back, setting your defense, is still really important. But I mean, we led our league in offensive rebounding. You see it all over the world right now. The numbers are starting to bear out that not only do you, obviously the value of the offensive rebound, the other possession's tremendous, but you actually slow teams up when you go crash. And, I know you guys were doing that in Michigan State 30 years ago.
And you make them play defense longer.
You make them play, yeah.
Right?
But, it got lost somewhere. I don't exactly know, but there was a stretch and I don't know if it was, 4-out spacing to 5-out spacing where people started to rationalize and say, hey, we don't want to send those guys because they're out on the perimeter and we want to be more skillful or whatever. We've kind of given up. We've just said, like, no matter where they are, we're just sending them all. Now, you got to play hard to do it.
Tom Izzo would tell you that his first Sweet 16 game, our third year at Michigan State, if you had to have him rank lessons learned in losing, this might still be number one. We played North Carolina when they had Vince Carter and Antoine Jameson in the Sweet 16 in Greensboro. Connecticut and Washington were on the other side of it. And we were so concerned about their fast break, we were a 4 offensive rebounding team.
Right.
We'd send 4. We wouldn't send the point guard. But we legitimately sent 4. We backed off in that game because of the fear of the break, sent 3, changed our entire mindset. And we didn't stop the break, but it changed our entire aggressiveness mindset. I promise you that there have been times Tom may have backed off on who went to the glass, but it was more based on who the player was than the concept of not going with that player. And I think, and that was 1998 we're talking about right there.
Yeah, so, I'm more convinced that missing layups or launching off 1 foot and falling on the ground is much, much, much worse for your transition defense than sending guys.
No question. Well, we could have a whole talk about that and the fundamentals, but this has been great. And I think people that hear this are going to get an education because there's so much, and not at one point in time did this podcast ever dive into how tough it is, right? Yes, it is a challenge. Yes, there is a lot of things you'd like to change. Yes, there's things that aren't right. But at the end of the day, all right, the challenge is what makes it great, right? And again, we can complain all we want all day long about the way things are. This is the way they are. And you have done a phenomenal job, Chris, of navigating it. What I say about you and anybody that would ever listen, when it came to being prepared to be a head coach, when none of us are ready when we get it, right? None of us are ready for what happens on day 2, day 3. We're just not because we haven't been that person yet. But when you talk about preparation to be ready, you're at the front of the list.
No, I appreciate that.
And I think you've done a phenomenal job with this, and we'll do it again. But it's been great, Chris, to have you on this. And everybody that tuned in, you're going to enjoy this. You're going to want to keep this. On behalf of Chris Caputo, on behalf of the Harbaugh Coaching Academy, I'm Tom Crean, and you've been listening and watching Lessons from the Sidelines. See you next time.